Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, hello everyone. Oh, and I've got this wrong thing up on my screen from an old podcast. I didn't have a chance to reset everything up, and my Lady Liberty is crooked. My signs up here. This is I like these, but let me my ADD or whatever, OCD or whatever disorder I have is going crazy. Alrighty, and I was trying to look something up, and a Facebook timeline thing, year, okay, 2014, so 2015, and it won't let you look up, oh, it will by month. Huh, interesting. Well, let me see if I can find what I'm looking for. Hello, Nate, and okay, look, I did it for 2015, and it's still pulling up everything. Why did it do that? I put in a filter. Oh, here we go. All right, let me try that again. Just giving it time to build a little bit of audience. I think the post I'm looking for is from July. It might be from June. And why would you start calling me Auntie Karen? I'm not sure what that's about. But let's do the preliminaries. Of course, along the bottom is my Patreon, because again, this is my job right now, and political YouTube channels do not get much advertising, just so that you know. So I do appreciate any assistance you can give, and of course, super chats are always welcome. And I do have a sponsor, which I am going to mention again this time. I did like a whole big thing on this book before, but if you have someone in your life that you appreciate, that's between the ages of, I think it was 3 and 10, young people, it's a great liberty-oriented book called A Tale of Two Brothers, written by a friend, one of my new friends in New Hampshire, that teaches the life lesson to children. And it's something in the age of helicopter parenting I really think we need to learn, is that life is more than just like biological life. Like life is simply more than just breathing. You know, life is actually living, you know, doing things, experiencing things. You know, in the more adult political world, we would say, would you rather be perfectly safe or perfectly free? You know, and it's a great book that teaches that lesson. You can find it on Amazon. It's by Sean Dempsey, or you can go to tale2brothers.com. I really, really recommend it. I enjoyed it, and I loved the pictures. Look at this picture. Oh my God, how adorable is this family? Oh my God, how adorable is that family? Oh, okay. I'll stop talking. I'll stop talking about my kids' book. I love my kids' books, but I'm trying to just give me. Did I say July? And then what month is this? Oh, I see the way it did it. You know, I post way too much. Have you guys figured that out? Holy crap. I post way too much. Look at all of this crap. So, well, I might not be able to find it. It might have been June. I'm going to just look in June, and if not, we are done. So date, it wasn't July. This would be relevant if I can find this post, but if I can't, I cannot. So how is everyone doing tonight? I would like for the discussion tonight to be an actual discussion. And I've talked about this topic before, but there was a recent post, and that is a post I am going to bring up that prompted me to do this. Okay, there's that. Well, I cannot find it. It doesn't really matter. But there was a current post that was somewhat of a joke that made me a comment that, and I did save that on my desktop, and I do need that, that made me want to discuss this particular topic. Where'd I put that screenshot now? I am not organized today, but we could just pull it up on my timeline if we need to. I think that's what we're going to need to do. So the title of this particular episode is The Agony and the Ecstasy of Anarchy. And what do I mean by that? I've been pondering this a lot lately, and I've asked this question to my friends. And the question is, and I love hearing everyone's answers, is there anything in life that both makes you deliriously happy and existentially miserable simultaneously? And that's like very strange that such a thing could exist, but in fact it does. And whenever I've asked that question of myself, the answer is just immediately anarchy. And why do I say that? Well, I can tell you there's been plenty of times. Need some sugar in me. This is like full octane Mountain Dew here. There's been plenty of times where, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, where I wished that I didn't know what I know. And I don't like the whole Matrix analogy. I think it's overused. Like anytime people mention a pill, I'm just like, you know. But I guess it is the really stereotypical. And the reason I suppose the imagery is so popular with people, because there is such an element of truth to it, of the whole Matrix thing of the red pill, right? Once you take it, you can't go back, and you better make sure that's what you really want. And at times, I realized that it was much happier going through life, not being continuously like offended and outraged over all the petty and not so petty violations of personal autonomy. And it like freaking sucks. It sucks to go through life every single fucking day realizing how unfree you actually are. It was quite pleasant going through life with raw America, apple pie, land of the free. And we're not free. We're not even close to free. And don't tell me, oh, you're freer than anyone else. I don't give a shit. You know? It's like being beaten 90 times and saying, well, everyone else is beaten 100 times. No, who cares? And it's like, it's wonderful to realize that, like, to realize what freedom is a beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing to realize that, and to get a sense and perception of your own actual rights and your own autonomy. Like, that's a wonderful thing to know and comprehend. But it's also a horrible thing to know and comprehend, because like everything angers me now. Like everything is like such an affront. And particularly politics. I mean, I hated politics before, but I hate politics now. Oh my God, because it's so... Am I the only one? Like, sometimes I feel like I'm the only one that feels this way. So I'm sitting in the town council meeting, and I'm just watching these people, and I am just getting so lathered up inside and so incensed that I'm like, who do you fucking think you are? Like, what gives you the right? And it's like, well, you know, a bunch of people voted, and it's like, okay, if, like, I convince everyone in this room to vote to, like, steal all your clothes, like, is that okay? I mean, we voted. What makes people think this is okay? Particularly, listen, if you got 10 people in a room and they're all like fine with that, okay, that's fine. But how do you handle the people that aren't fine with it? And I'm talking about being fine with it before the fact. Like, I understand where, like, for instance, in actual voluntary organizations, you can have people who are all fine with the rules until, you know, and all fine with democracy in a voluntary thing, right? Until a vote doesn't go their way, and then all of a sudden they're not fine with it. And that's a different thing than not being fine with it before the fact. Like, not agreeing from the get-go. And it just, like, each day, I get more and more just like, you know? So, yeah, it can be miserable, can't it? Do I have lipstick on my teeth? You guys never tell me. Talk about violations. No. No. Okay, I thought I saw lipstick. You better tell me if I have lipstick on my teeth. That's all I could say. Oh my God. So yeah. And as the time between being in that same mindset as most other people and now grows farther apart, my tolerance for it gets less and less. Like, my understanding just gets, my fuse gets shorter and shorter about it. So I remember having that mindset, but the memory's growing dim. So that is like the polarizing thing. And it's also quite existentially depressing to realize that you're never going to be free. Like, it's pretty much impossible. Like, you were born a slave, you're going to die a slave. And that is freaking depressing. Absolutely freaking depressing. But I wanted to bring up, if you give me 1 second, in comments here. And I've got to find this post, the thing that made me decide to just revisit this subject again. And 1 second here. I didn't go that far back. I post way too much. I'm sure you guys are going, yeah. Oh, here it is. Okay. And let me just save this. And let me put on my screen. 1 second here. And I just thought that this is more just shared to be funny. Oh, no wonder I can't find it because that wasn't my desktop. Yeah, here we go. So y'all probably saw this on my wall where a friend of mine said, here, you were posting through your transition to ANCAP and made it seem reasonable enough for me not to dismiss it entirely. Then you went on Tom Wood's show and listened, and I listened to it for the first time, and that opened a can of worms, so to speak. And I was like, oh, okay, yes. And I was like, oh, wow, I don't know whether I should apologize or not. And the reason why is because of what I'm saying here. Because maybe, dude, you would have been happier if you hadn't considered this. And he got it because he said, I wasn't sure if I should say thanks or not. And doesn't that encapsulate it? And another reason I wanted to do this, and I am glad JJ is here because it's so easier to address things in spoken form, and I encourage anyone who is in chat to engage. Because we are going through fundamental philosophical questions here, fundamental presuppositions. My fundamental presupposition, and I do think through, I know a lot of people don't like Hoppy, and I don't particularly like Hoppy, but his argumentation ethics are spot on, because you can't argue against the fundamental presupposition of self-ownership without asserting self-ownership. You have to assume that which you are trying to disprove. So the fundamental presupposition is personal autonomy and self-ownership. And that, of course, is the libertarian presupposition, and everything flows from that. And I think it is absolutely incoherent to argue against it. You can't argue against it without destroying it. It's almost like sawing off the branch upon which you sit. So the argument of, well, you're not forced to live anywhere, is just asserting something that is yet to be proven. And that is that those who are trying to exert power over other people in a territorial region have a legitimate or just right to do that. Now, it might be expedient to leave someplace, like if the mob in a certain town doesn't have the right to extort people, but you might make a rational self-decision to leave rather than fight the mob. That doesn't mean that the mob is legitimate. It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to complain and say it was wrong when you were there. And it also certainly doesn't mean that you have to leave. You might make a choice in your rational self-interest. So when it comes down to personal autonomy In order for there to be any... See, libertarians do not believe in any positive rights that are not voluntarily agreed upon. And there's no inherent right for anyone to impose any positive rights upon you. All of those claims are inherently legitimate, and you do not have to do anything to avoid them, for them to be wrong, and for you to state it's wrong, and for you to be wronged. Tactically, you may choose to go someplace else, but there is no requirement. And you don't blame the victim by saying, well, you could have went somewhere. Well, they could have not violated my rights. And that is the fundamental question. There is absolutely no authority for a collective to assert positive rights on a whole population of people who have not only consented to it perhaps once, but continually consented to it. Because you should always have also the right to withdraw your consent. I did a whole show on whether or not you have the right to sell yourself into slavery, and it all depends upon how you define slavery. And I just think I answered it before you typed it, is you always have to have the right to withdraw your consent. So if you mean irrevocable, no. But if you mean functionally slavery, but slavery you could at any time say no to, you could leave, then absolutely. You can't permanently alienate your will, because your will is who you are. The only way you can permanently alienate your will is to kill yourself, or if in the future there happens to be like a zombie making drug or something, then we can talk then. But your will is who you are. You can't permanently alienate who you are, but you can voluntarily subjugate who you are. And JJ asks, who enforces that right to leave? See, the funny thing about all of these questions is that they're just diversions from the assertion. It's like almost when people say, well, what about, it's a bunch of what abouts. I do not even, that's an easy one to answer, but I don't have to answer any of those for the fundamental presupposition to be true. Who enforces that right to leave? I do, or anybody else who is voluntarily willing to help me. And if I am unable to, that still doesn't mean it's not a right. It just means that I have a certain weakness. People have a right not to be killed. Some people might be too powerless to defend themselves against a murderer, but the murderer is still a murderer, even if the person couldn't adequately defend themselves and no one else was willing to voluntarily help them. And the fish, that's why I said it depends on how you define slavery. I wouldn't define it that way. I did a show on this for a patron, and it's like anybody who's a patron of $20 a month or more gets to ask me to do a pretty comprehensive question once a month. And I've had one person request it, and the same person has requested another one that I'm in the middle of researching right now. But I want to, one second, in case you guys, I hate when people say, oh, you can find that on my channel without like giving you more specifics, because I've got hundreds of videos on my channel. So I want to, one second here, let me share my screen with you. Wrong thing. Right here, right here. So if you go to my channel, and I know this is my, whatchamacallit, my background. This is the, look for that title right there. It says, does libertarianism permit voluntary slavery? And it's 45 minutes, and I get into that in depth, and it was a sponsored show. So I can't repeat all of that here. But you could also see, let me hide this widget here for a second. The references I do use for that show is Kinsella on inalienability and punishment, and Walter Block, how we come to own ourselves, and that sort of thing. It really, really gets into the claim of self-ownership. And I ended up agreeing with Kinsella and disagreeing with Walter Block, who were on opposite sides of that issue. Okay, now how do I get back to me? Yay, we're back to me. Now let me put back up my chat widget. So the retort of, why don't you just move to Somalia, which is, it's kind of inside baseball for those of you who aren't libertarians who are listening, misses the point that while it might be expedient, there's no requirement for anybody to go anywhere in order to complain against violations of their rights. And a violation of their rights is imposing a positive obligation upon them that they do not agree to, particularly one that's enforced through coercion, through force. Which, of course, all government is. Now, that brings us, and just to back up a bit on some definitions, because I never know who's going to end up watching this show, as to what is libertarian anarchy, because the word anarchy is quite equivocable. Equivocable? No, equivocable, that's not it. What's, you know what the word I'm talking about. Has many meanings. Equivocal. That's what I'm looking for. Equivocal, not equivocable, equivocal. And that's why I put the word libertarian in front of it, because then that limits it. Because the word in itself, and it's funny, what it's come to mean in popular parlance just shows our sheepishness. And I mean that, like, not in the traditional sense of the word, like being shy. I mean, like, literally like sheep, where we think we need rulers. So, the word arche, actually, I knew that word before I even, like, put it into the political sense. From Koine Greek, it's in the Bible, like in the book of Revelation, where it says Christ is above all powers and all authorities. The word there is arche, for powers and authorities. So monarchy is one ruler, and oligarchy, you know, it's a ruler by a group. And anarchy, means none. So you have aerobics and anaerobics. So aerobic is with air and anaerobics is without air. So anarchy means without rulers. And in the political context, it means without political rulers. But it does not mean, at least in libertarian anarchy, without rules. You don't need rulers to have rules. So libertarian anarchy is bounded by the non-aggression principle, where plain out just anarchy can be anything. You could be a violent anarchist. I mean, we see plenty of those, even in the streets today with Antifa and stuff like that. But a libertarian anarchist is one that would uphold negative rights. And JJ asks, how can a right exist without any enforcement method? I gave you an enforcement method. There's always an enforcement method. If you mean a government, people have rights without a government. You and I could be on an island, and it's still wrong for you to rape me, even though I can't call the police. So the right still exists. Rights are existential. They're not something that only exists because of some outside thing. And the moral enforcement method would be that I could kick you in the nuts or, you know, bang you upside the head, and I would be perfectly justified in doing that. And it doesn't require an outside observer. It's not like Schrodinger's cat, where someone needs to look in and see if the cat is alive or dead. It exists independently of an outside observer. One second. And yeah, Elastic Giraffe, I actually would describe myself as more of a panarchist. I actually think that's what anarchy would devolve to. Well, devolve's the wrong word, because devolve kind of means, has a negative connotation. But no, I believe that's what libertarian anarchy would entail is basically panarchy, because you do have the right to voluntarily subject yourself. There's a concept, it's funny, I always use biblical analogies. It's in the book, I think it's Ephesians or Galatians, I'm pretty sure it's Galatians, where it talks about kenosis, where it says, although he existed in the form of God, being God, he took on the form of man, where the Greek word there is kenosis, which means how Christ voluntarily laid aside the privileges of divinity in order to become a man. By metaphor, we can lay aside any of our rights that we want. For instance, I'm a pacifist. I don't think I don't have the inherent right to lethal self-defense. I voluntarily lay that aside for a religious purpose. So I do think panarchy is the ultimate expression of libertarian anarchy, and people can choose to whatever system of governance that they wish. And unless the one that you agreed to involves being tied to a certain geographical area, you do not even have to move. And polyvaic jurisprudence systems are certainly possible without even being tied to a geographical area. So JJ, we just fundamentally disagree. If you think rights aren't inherently something on their own, there's nothing I could say to convince you. And I actually would say I wouldn't want to live in your world, because rights in my world are natural and they exist whether or not someone can adequately enforce them or not, which is why I can say in communist China, where children, where parents are being forcibly sterilized, their rights are violated, even though there is no one to enforce them. I guess in your world, their rights aren't being violated because they can't enforce that right. Well, that's pretty sad. Just fundamentally disagree on that point. And there's not much I can do to convince somebody otherwise. We just will not agree. I didn't say inherently enforceable. I said they're inherent whether or not they're enforced or not. There's a difference. So for instance, with the Constitution, I don't believe the Constitution grants us any rights. It does recognize certain rights, but it doesn't grant them, because rights exist independently of any kind of recognition of them by anyone. The rights still exist. To be very interesting grounding principle as to who has the best claim. The libertarian argument is that the person who has the better claim, the better exclusive claim to something, that's how self-ownership comes about, is that no one else has a higher or better exclusive claim to the use of my body. But when you come down to fundamental presuppositions, if you do not believe it's inherently wrong to forcibly sterilize somebody, we don't even have a good starting place. You could just assert that it's not, and I assert that it is. And there's really not too much we can do about that, except for I tend to believe, and of course this does come from a religious perspective, but I also do think it just comes from a human perspective, is that the image of God, and everybody knows otherwise, we know that we have certain fundamental rights. And the Constitution was intended to limit the role of government, but it doesn't. I do believe that was its intention, but it doesn't do it. I wouldn't agree with it even as originally written, though. And it's funny that the justification for the formation of the country was that, you know, all men. It's funny, the justification, the underlying presupposition behind the Constitution actually is natural rights, that all men are invested by their creator with certain unalienable rights. And I agree with that. And it goes on to derive from that. And I do think it's a correct derivation that government can only exist by the consent of the governed. Well, I don't consent. I don't consent to this government. And that is the flaw in our system, because it does depend upon that supposition. But the minute somebody doesn't consent, then we have an issue. And I do think, well, it does make a difference. If somebody agrees or doesn't agree, that's almost, well, you know, you and I sitting in a living room, we can't do anything about the Jews being gassed. Too bad. It makes a difference in acknowledging the human dignity that somebody's rights are being violated. It doesn't require enforcement for us to acknowledge that rights are being violated. We just fundamentally disagree, and I'm okay with that. I don't ever try to argue people out of their fundamental presuppositions. I think sooner or later, the human spirit sees it. Kyle B, I can explain positive rights. I don't like the terminology of positive negative rights because I think it is somewhat confusing, because it seems to like imply like a moral judgment, though there is ultimately one in its definition. There isn't. A negative right is something that you possess inherently by virtue of being a human being that doesn't require anyone to do anything for you in order for you to have that right. You have the right to life. I don't have to do anything for you to, you're alive. It requires nothing of me for you to be alive. You have the right to free speech. You have certain inherent negative rights that don't require anyone to do anything for you in order for you to have those rights. The only duty that anyone has towards you in a negative rights fashion is the duty of non-aggression. You have the right to life. I don't have to feed you, but I can't kill you. Now, a positive right is something that requires somebody to do something for you in order for that alleged right to be fulfilled. That's like the alleged right to health care. You have a right to obtain health care from any willing person. That's a negative right. But to say you have a right to it, meaning somebody has to provide it to you, that's an alleged positive right. And there are no such things as inherent positive rights because they require another person to do something for you. Let me get the language for you out of the LP platform here because I think it says it beautifully. One second here. Okay, and let me share my screen. And let me hide my widget. Okay, under here, under personal liberty, it says individuals are inherently free to make choices for themselves and must accept responsibility for the consequences of the choices they make. Our support of an individual's right to make choices in life does not mean that we necessarily approve or disapprove of those choices. No individual, group, or government may rightly initiate force against any other individual, group, or government. Libertarians reject the notion that groups have inherent rights. Now, there's actually another place this goes. Hold on one second. It talks about unless I'm thinking of a different. thing here. I might be thinking of a different thing here. Am I thinking of the Colorado platform? Mike, help me out. I think the word, oh, right here. Okay, it's under rights and discrimination. Let me, here we go. Rights, yeah, under rights and discrimination. Libertarians embrace the concept that all people are born with certain inherent rights. We reject the idea that a natural right can ever impose an obligation upon others to fulfill that right. That is a pretty succinct explanation of negative rights. And acknowledging to JJ that Hitler was violating the rights of the Jews, doesn't have to save a single Jew for it to be true. It does uphold their human dignity, and you never know. It could motivate somebody who does have the capability to go and enforce those rights. But the two concepts, their rights are still being violated, even if no one can save them. Elastic Giraffe, do you believe individuals have the right to opt out of a libertarian legal system in favor of an alternative, non-libertarian legal system? In other words, must one consent to just laws? Those are two different questions. I do believe that individuals have the right to opt out of any system with other willing individuals that can impose things upon them that, absent their agreement, would be violations of their rights. But because they agreed to them, they have assumed those obligations upon themselves, but they cannot enforce them upon other people who have not opted in. However, when dealing with people that have not opted into that system, they must, and it doesn't require, somebody's rights do not require your consent. These are the inherent things. So even if in your fictional non-libertarian legal system where it would be okay to say, beat the shit out of somebody because they insulted your wife, you can't then impose that upon somebody outside of that system, because that would be unjust because they have not consented. If that makes any kind of sense. Of course, this is all like surely theoretical, but that is in effect what panarchy would be. I don't know what Zyklon B help is, Daniel. That's beyond my ken. All right, now how do I get out of this again? Oh my God, I need multiple screens is the problem. Right now I'm just dealing, well, I've got my comment screen up here, but I've got only this one master control screen. And I actually have a couple different cameras. I had this other, look, hi, I've got multiple cameras. Oh, I'll show you here. Oh, look at my Mr. Rooster. Wayne was like, why do you want this? But I just love my rooster. It's all the Via de Cristo thing. I've got a rooster fetish ever since then. I don't have my lights on, but these do light up. But that's the other side of my studio. But let me go back to my main thing here. Oh, and Mike asked me earlier, are we recording this weekend? Yes. We are recording this weekend. And Mike, are you going to come out to the protest on Saturday? I posted about it. I think you saw. I don't know if you saw. Hopefully you saw. And I don't know if there's anything else. I'm just chatting with you guys because I just had basically wanted to express my daily existential angst. And you want to know what? I fucked up today. I was supposed to be on Unsafe Spaces, and we were talking about a libertarian exodus to go somewhere and actually be free. Oh my God. I'd do it. If there was some place to actually be free, I would do it. Unfortunately, New Hampshire is not it. yeah, so anything else that you guys want to chat about? I think tomorrow I might talk about the town council meeting, and I play those tapes to try to equip people to go and get involved in their local settings as well. That is where libertarians can make the biggest difference, is in excuse me, your local settings. And you may have seen the email I sent to my town council earlier today as a follow-up. Because I'm going to put this up as well, and then we will get going. But here we go. On the last line there where I put imposing taxes on people not even here, visitors and future homeowners, is the ultimate in taxation without representation. Because this is what happened. The town people decided they needed more money for parks and shit like that, which is not the proper role of government. And so they're going to impose a lodging tax on hotel visitors and a per square footage new home builder's tax. So what they are doing is deciding that people who don't live here yet, we are going to proactively decide that we're going to tax them. I mean, oh my God. Voting to rob other people against their will is already bad enough when at least those people had the chance to vote on it themselves. But people who don't even have a chance yet to vote in here are already proactively, you know, it's already decided we're going to take this from them. So that is just absolutely crazy to me. So obviously, yeah, when the townspeople were polled, they were like, oh no, we don't want to pay for this ourselves. Let's have people that come from out of town pay for it. Or let's have the new families who might want to move here pay for it. It's crazy to me. It's just, find the right victims, I guess, as long as it's not you. All right, everyone. I think that will be it for this evening. I hope you have an awesome night. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow. I've got a lot of work to do this evening. Maybe finish. Isn't that crazy, Doc? I was like, excuse me? Excuse me? Oh, so Elastic Giraffe asks, do you believe there are strict cultural conditions that must be met for voluntarist anarchy to be sustained, or is it more culture agnostic? I believe it's culture agnostic. Yeah, I don't think there are strict cultural conditions. Parks might be good for property values. You don't get to steal from other people for that, though. If people want to voluntarily pay for it, if all these rich people that are outnumbering the poorer people, I live in a pretty affluent community, so the more affluent people are always volunteering to pay for more stuff. But the thing is, the poor people are getting forced to pay for it as well. And, you know, if all of these people that are more affluent, they should be voting to have some kind of checkbox, you know, on their yearly taxes where they can put in extra money if they like for the parks. Nothing's stopping them from doing that, or leaving the town money in their wills, or donating property of their own. All right, everyone, I am going to take off and do some work. I really did enjoy this time with you, and I hope you have an awesome night. Bye-bye.
take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.